policies. I asked you if you had put him on administrative leave. This is in question because the governor of Minnesota said the only person not being investigated for the shooting of Renee Good is the federal agent who shot her. Is he correct that the federal agent is not being investigated in any way? Is there any review of protocol here?
We are following the exact same investigative and review process that we always have under ICE and under the Department of Homeland Security and within the administration. The exact same policy that the Biden administration used.
So
the exact
his
same
actions
review.
are being
So we haven't
reviewed?
changed any of that. I would not listen to Governor Walz. He has a very bad track record. All this billions of dollars of fraud was stolen from people under his watch. He allowed it to happen, and he also ignored the law and allowed the city of Minneapolis to burn down in 2020. He certainly isn't have good judgment in these types of situations, and I'm not going to be taking any advice from him in how we implement the law and protect people.
Well, 1,500 American soldiers have been ordered by the Pentagon to prepare for possible deployment to Minnesota. That's according to a defence official. State officials have also mobilised the National Guard to assist with tasks such as crowd control and support for law enforcement. The Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey believes the act is to intimidate the state's residents.
I don't think Homeland understands the basic dynamic as to how stuff works in Minnesota here. But the bottom line is, as we know, this is not about safety. It's not about crime. This is about intimidation. And in Minneapolis, we're not going to be intimidated.
The boost in troops comes in the wake of a shooting involving ICE agents in the American state.
Well, as anti-ICE protests continue across the US, protesters have been given some protection through the federal court. A new ruling limits the powers of ICE to detain and use tear gas on protesters who are not obstructing officers.
In a new ruling Friday, a federal judge in Minnesota bars immigration agents in Minneapolis from detaining or using tear gas on protesters who are not obstructing authorities. District Judge Kate Menendez's injunction is in response to a lawsuit filed on behalf of 6 Minnesota activists back in December. Minnesota's Attorney General thanked those activists, writing on X, quote, "This preliminary win matters for every Minnesotan, exercising their constitutional right to peaceful protest and witness." With the latest ruling, federal authorities are blocked from detaining those peacefully protesting or safely following officers at a, quote, "appropriate distance," unless there's reasonable suspicion that they are obstructing or interfering with agents. Critics argue that officers also need to be protected from, quote, "dangerous rioters."
What we've seen from a lot of these agitators and violent offenders is that they're spitting on our law enforcement. They're weaponizing their vehicles against our law enforcement. They're hitting, pushing, shoving.
As anti-ICE demonstrations continue nationwide, state authorities are urging the public to keep protests peaceful.
Any actions that harm people, destroy property, or jeopardize public safety will not be tolerated. Demonstrations must remain safe.
Critics of the judge's decision say it's an attempt to micromanage ICE's actions.
Let's switch things over to the US now for more reaction. Joining us is our US analyst, Michael Ware, for his thoughts on this. As I mentioned earlier, Michael, good to see you, by the way. Whenever it comes to Donald Trump, I think one should just sort of look past the initial statement and look to what's behind it all, because that's generally what the US president is getting at. So what do you think is the main aim here for Donald Trump? What's he trying to achieve?
Yeah, well, first I want to say I know Nick Robertson there in Greenland, and yes, he looked like he was freezing. And mate, you've asked a great question, because what's really behind all of this? There is absolutely no question that Greenland is of vital strategic interest to the United States. No one even doubts that. The problem is that the US militarily already has an unfettered and free hand in Greenland. Since a treaty in 1951, they can build as many bases or airfields as they like. So the great question has been, and that deal was reaffirmed in 2004 with the agreement of the Greenland government, the semi-autonomous government. So you've already got it. Why do this? And that's what I think is your question. Because if America takes Greenland, and it could do it economically, or as President Trump says, he refuses to rule out military options. None of us see American troops invading Greenland, but say by one means or another they take it. The logic behind this, amongst the thinkers behind President Trump's foreign policy, is essentially, the politics of great powers and dividing the world up into hemispheres. All right, Russia and Europe, you can have that hemisphere. Hopefully a new Europe will arise to properly defend itself against Russia. That's all their problems. America's problems are concentrated on the Western Hemisphere, North and South American continents, and they deem that includes Greenland by necessity. That would leave the Eastern Hemisphere to China or the Indo-Pacific. Now, what the American strategists are saying is that by us doing this and dividing the world up this way, we can refocus on our great enemy. There's a bipolar world. It's America versus China. But what that means is if they do anything of the kind that they're talking about with Greenland, even though the officials and heads of state met here in America and said we agreed to disagree, this would be the death knell of NATO. And the Americans know that. If they touch Greenland, they're basically leaving NATO and leaving NATO to themselves and saying we don't need you, want you, or value you. So the greater purpose behind this, okay, maybe there's some rare earth minerals, very hard to extract, unexplored, and there hasn't been any sort of infrastructure developed to exploit those. So it could be about securing national strategic interests in rare earth minerals to guard against China. But it also means killing NATO, it also means divorcing Europe. So this does fit within a certain radical, global, strategic policy or thinking that is running rampant right now in the White House and the Trump administration.
So how serious are they about it all?
Absolutely serious. I'm frightened by it. I had no idea. I thought it was just the president, speaking off the top of his head, that it was just sort of putting ideas out there into the ether. But about a month ago, President Trump appointed a special envoy to Greenland, which deeply troubled the Danes, Europe, and the Greenlanders. And I can tell you for a fact that behind the scenes, this administration has been sounding out people to become the nominal governor of the new protectorate of Greenland. I'm frightened and stunned and surprised, even given all the people I know in this administration, that they are so deadly serious about this.
Okay, we'll see where that ends up. Good to see you, Michael. Thank you. We'll chat to you again next week.